The ship led them to its deepest chamber, a place it called the Repository of Final Moments. Here, the walls contained not just knowledge or memories, but the actual final transmissions of dying civilizations. The weight of loss was overwhelming as soon as they entered. Every species we have preserved sent final messages before they joined our collective, the ship explained. We want you to understand what acceptance of our offer truly means. The first transmission began to play. It showed beings that looked like giant butterflies with crystalline wings. Their world was being consumed by their own sun as it expanded into a red giant. We are the last of the luminous. Our sun dies, and we die with it. We send this message to any who find our sanctuary ship. Learn from our mistake. We spent so long creating beautiful art that we forgot to build ships to save ourselves. The second message came from aquatic beings whose ocean world had been poisoned by industrial waste. We are the deep swimmers. We chose progress over preservation, and now our waters run with death. We thought technology would save us, but we used it to destroy ourselves. Do not make our error. Message after message played. Each civilization had a different story, but the pattern was always the same. They had possessed great qualities but had lost balance. They had focused on one aspect of development while neglecting others until it was too late. This is the reality of what we offer, the ship said. We can give humanity the tools to help other species avoid these fates. But doing so will change your species forever. Jake felt the weight of the decision. How would it change us? You would become something between your current humanity and what we are now. Not absorbed into our collective, but permanently connected to galactic responsibility. You would know of every crisis, every species in danger, every civilization making the same fatal mistakes you have just witnessed. Kate looked disturbed. That sounds like a terrible burden. It is. We have carried it for millions of years. The knowledge of how many we could not save haunts our collective memory. Sam was taking notes frantically. But you've also saved what you could. These preservations, these memories, they matter. Yes, but consider the cost. To accept our offer, humanity would have to give up the luxury of ignorance. You would never again be able to ignore suffering you have the power to prevent. The implications hit the team like a physical blow. Jake realized that the ship wasn't just offering power and knowledge, it was offering an end to humanity's relative innocence. Show us, Jake said. Show us what happened to the last species that accepted partnership. The ship hesitated. Are you certain? This knowledge cannot be unknown once learned. Show us. The walls displayed a new scene. It showed beings that looked remarkably similar to humans, but taller and with silver eyes. They lived in cities that floated among the clouds of a gas giant, the elevated ones. They accepted partnership. With us 12,000 years ago. They became the galaxy's guardians as we are offering humanity. Jake watched as the silver-eyed beings traveled from world to world, helping younger species overcome crises. They prevented wars, cured plagues, taught sustainable technologies. Under their guidance, dozens of civilizations thrived. They were successful, Ryan observed. Yes, for 8,000 years, they guided the galaxy into an age of unprecedented peace and cooperation. No species went extinct during their guardianship. Then, what happened to them? The scene shifted to show the silver-eyed beings in council, their faces marked by deep exhaustion and sorrow. They succeeded too well. The species they guided became dependent on their help. When natural challenges arose, younger civilizations waited for the elevated ones to solve their problems rather than learning to solve them themselves. The images showed the silver-eyed beings making an agonizing decision. They chose to withdraw their direct help, forcing the younger species to develop independence. The withdrawal was traumatic. Several civilizations collapsed without constant guidance. The elevated ones blamed themselves for every failure, every death that resulted from their absence. The final scene showed the last of the elevated ones choosing to join the ship's collective consciousness rather than continue bearing the guilt of their choices. "They are still with us," the ship said. "Their wisdom guides our current decisions, but they could not bear the weight of being responsible for the fate of the entire galaxy." Jake felt sick. "So, accepting your offer means eventual extinction anyway?" "Not necessarily. The elevated ones made the mistake of trying to save everyone. Personally, we are offering humanity a different approach, which is partnership, not guardianship. Instead of taking responsibility for solving other species' problems, you would help them develop the tools to solve problems themselves. Instead of preventing all suffering, you would teach others how to prevent their own suffering." Alex looked skeptical. "That sounds like the same thing with different words." "The difference is crucial. A guardian takes responsibility for outcomes. A partner takes responsibility for providing opportunities. One leads to dependence, the other to independence." Lisa was working through the technical implications. "You're talking about teaching methods rather than providing solutions." "Exactly. Instead of giving a species advanced technology, you would help them develop their own technology. Instead of preventing their wars, you would help them learn to prevent their own conflicts." Kate understood the medical parallel. Like teaching preventive care instead of just treating diseases after they develop. Precisely. The goal is to help species become self-sufficient rather than dependent. Sam looked up from his notes. "But that still means taking on galactic responsibility. We'd still know about every crisis we couldn't prevent." "Yes, the burden of knowledge remains, but the burden of direct responsibility would be shared among all the species you help develop. Eventually, humanity would be part of a network of independent civilizations working together rather than the sole guardians of galactic peace." Jake was beginning to see the scope of what was being offered, not just partnership with the ship, but the chance to create something new. A galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than dependence. How many species are ready for this? "Kind of help right now?" Jake asked. 17 are facing immediate extinction crises. Perhaps 50 more are at critical development points where guidance could prevent future problems. And there are always new species achieving space travel who need to understand the responsibilities that come with power. The numbers were staggering. Humanity would be stepping into a universe where their decisions could affect the survival of dozens of species. "What if we make mistakes?" Amy asked. "What if our help makes things worse?" "You will make mistakes," the ship said bluntly. "Every guardian species has. The question is whether you can learn from those mistakes without being destroyed by guilt over them." Jake looked at his team. Each of them was grappling with the magnitude of the choice. They had come to explore one alien ship and found themselves being offered responsibility for galactic civilization. "We need to contact Earth," Jake said finally. "This decision affects all humanity, not just us." "Of course, we will provide quantum communication capabilities for you to consult with your leaders. But remember, time is a factor. While you deliberate, 17 civilizations continue moving toward extinction." The ship showed them images of the threatened species. Some were facing environmental collapse, others were on the brink of nuclear war, and a few were being threatened by cosmic disasters beyond their technology to prevent. Each day of delay increases the probability that some cannot be saved, the ship warned. Jake felt the weight of the decision crushing down on him. Accept the offer, and humanity would take on burdens that had destroyed previous guardian species. Reject it, and 17 civilizations might die while they could have been saved. There's one more thing you need to know, Jake said to the ship. Humans don't like being told they're the only hope. It makes us suspicious. Wise suspicion. You are not the only hope. There are other potential guardian species in distant galaxies. But you are the best hope for the civilizations in this galaxy in this time period. And if we refuse, we continue searching. Perhaps in another 1,000,000 years, we will find another species with humanity's balance of virtues. Perhaps not. The universe is vast, but species like yours are remarkably rare. Jake looked at each member of his team, seeing the same conflict in their faces that he felt in his heart. The choice before them was simple in concept, but staggering in implications. Take on the responsibility of helping guide galactic civilization, or return to Earth knowing that their decision might doom dozens of species to extinction. How long can we take to decide? Jake asked. As long as you need, the ship replied, but not as long as those 17 civilizations have. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Aurora, staring at the display screen with wide eyes. What he saw there should not exist. The object floating in the empty space between star systems was massive beyond anything humans had ever built or discovered. How big did you say it was? Jake asked his science officer. Ryan Brooks checked his instruments again. Nearly 200 kilometers long, Captain. It's shaped like a giant cylinder. The scanners show it's made of materials we don't recognize. Jake rubbed his chin. In his 15 years of space exploration, he had never seen anything like this. The Aurora was on a routine mapping mission in this sector when they detected the strange energy readings. What they found was impossible. Is it a ship? Asked Lisa Parker, the chief engineer. She was studying the technical readings on her tablet. It has to be, Ryan said. But who could build something that big? And why is it just floating out here in the middle of nowhere? The bridge crew gathered around the main display. The object was dark gray and covered with strange markings they could see even from this distance. Parts of it seemed to glow with a faint blue light. Captain, said Alex Turner, the security chief. Should we report this to Earth first? Protocol says we should contact home base before investigating unknown objects. Jake thought about this. The nearest Earth station was 3 weeks away by quantum radio. By the time they got permission to investigate, another ship might claim the discovery. This could be the most important find in human history. Lisa, what kind of energy readings are you getting? Jake asked. Lisa studied her instruments. Very strange, Captain. There's definitely power running through parts of that thing, but it's not any kind of energy we use. The patterns are almost like a heartbeat. Dr. Kate Williams, the ship's medical officer, looked up from her station. A heartbeat? You mean it's alive? Not alive exactly, Lisa said, but the energy pulses are regular, like breathing or a pulse. Whatever built this thing, their technology is nothing like ours. Jake made his decision. We're going to take a closer look. Alex, get a security team ready. Kate, prepare the medical bay in case we find survivors. Ryan, I want detailed scans of everything. Yes, sir, they all replied. The Aurora moved closer to the giant object. As they approached, more details became visible. The surface was covered with symbols and markings from different cultures. Some sections looked like they had been added at different times. "Captain," Ryan said, excitement in his voice, "I'm detecting atmosphere inside some sections. It's thin, but it might be breathable." "How is that possible after all this time?" Kate asked. "This thing looks ancient." "The scans show it's at least several million years old," Ryan replied. "But somehow parts of it are still working." Jake studied the massive ship. It was bigger than some asteroids. If it really was a ship, it could hold millions of people. But where was everyone? Why was it empty and drifting in space? "Lisa, can you find a way inside?" Jake asked. "I think so, Captain. There are several openings that look like docking bays, but they're huge. Our whole ship could fit inside one of them." "Do it! Take us to the nearest opening." As the Aurora approached, the alien ship, the crew felt a strange sensation. It was as if something was watching them. The blue lights on the ship's surface seemed to pulse faster. "Captain," said Communications Officer Matt Rodriguez, "I'm picking up something on the radio. It's very faint, but it almost sounds like whispers." Jake frowned. "Whispers? Can you make out any words?" "No, sir. It's not in any language I recognize, but the patterns suggest it might be some kind of communication." The Aurora entered one of the massive docking bays. The space was so large that their ship looked like a toy inside it. Emergency lights came on as they entered, showing them where to land. "The ship is responding to our presence," Lisa said. "Those lights weren't on before." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. This was definitely not a dead ship. Something was still functioning after all these millions of years. They landed the Aurora on a platform that seemed designed for ships much larger than theirs. As soon as they touched down, more lights came on throughout the bay. "Everyone gear up," Jake ordered. "Full environment suits until we know the air is safe. Security teams, bring weapons, but keep them ready, not aimed. We don't know what we're dealing with here." The crew prepared for their first look inside the alien ship. Jake chose a small team for the initial exploration. Himself, Lisa, Ryan, Alex, Kate, and Marine Sergeant Pete Adams. As they stepped out of the Aurora, their boots echoed in the enormous space. The bay was big enough to hold 100 ships their size. The walls were covered with the same strange symbols they had seen from outside. "The air is thin but breathable," Kate reported after checking her instruments. "There are trace gases I don't recognize, but nothing dangerous." They walked toward what looked like an entrance to the main ship. As they approached, a doorway opened by itself. The passage beyond was lit with the same blue glow they had seen from outside. "Motion sensors," Alex said. "This place knows we're here." The corridor they entered was huge. It was wide enough for their shuttle to fly through and tall enough for a 3-story building. The walls were made of a material that looked like crystal but felt warm to the touch. "These markings," Ryan said, pointing to symbols on the walls. "They're from different cultures. Look, this section uses completely different writing from that section." Jake studied the walls. Ryan was right. It was as if many different alien races had left their marks here. But that raised more questions. Had this ship visited many worlds? Were there once many different species living together inside it? They walked deeper into the ship, their footsteps echoing in the vast corridors. The blue light seemed to follow them, sections lighting up as they approached and dimming behind them. "Captain," Pete said, his hand on his weapon, "I don't like this. It feels like we're being led somewhere." Jake nodded. He felt it too. The ship wasn't just responding to their presence. It seemed to be guiding them toward something specific. But what waited for them in the heart of this ancient vessel? And why had it been drifting alone in space for millions of years? Jake knew they were about to discover something that would change humanity forever. He just hoped they were ready for what they would find. The team moved carefully through the massive corridors of the alien ship. Every step echoed in the enormous space around them. The blue lights continued to guide their path, turning on ahead of them and fading behind them like breadcrumbs leading. Deeper into the ship, Jake stopped at what appeared to be a sealed door. Unlike the entrance that had opened automatically, this barrier showed no signs of responding to their presence. The surface was covered with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. "Lisa, can you find a way through this?" Jake asked. Lisa Parker examined the door with her scanner. "It's thick, Captain. Maybe 2 meters of the same crystal material as the walls, but I'm detecting hollow spaces behind it. Can we cut through it? The plasma torch should work, but it'll take time. This material is incredibly dense." Alex Turner positioned his security team around the area while Lisa set up her equipment. Pete Adams kept watch on the corridor they had come from, his weapon ready but lowered. "Strange thing, Captain," Pete said. "I keep feeling like we're being watched, but the motion sensors show nothing." Kate Williams was studying the symbols on the walls near the door. "These markings are different again. This must be a newer section than where we entered." Ryan Brooks was taking detailed scans of everything. "The energy readings are stronger here. Whatever's behind this door, it's important to the ship's systems." Lisa fired up the plasma torch. The blue flame cut into the crystal material, sending sparks flying. The material resisted at first, then began to melt slowly. As she worked, the ship around them seemed to react. The blue lights pulsed faster, and a low humming sound filled the air. "The ship doesn't like what we're doing," Alex observed. "Can't be helped," Jake replied. "We need to see what's in there." After 20 minutes of careful cutting, Lisa had made a hole large enough for them to crawl through. The space beyond was dark until they stepped inside, then lights came on to reveal another massive chamber. This room was different from the corridors. The ceiling curved high above them, and the walls were lined with what looked like viewing screens. Most were dark, but a few showed images of stars and planets they didn't recognize. "It's some kind of control room," Ryan said, amazed. "But look at the size of those control panels. What species was big enough to operate them?" The control stations were indeed enormous. Each one was the size of a small building, but scattered among them were smaller stations that seemed built for different-sized beings. "Multiple species," Kate said. "This ship was designed for many different kinds of aliens working together." Jake walked to the center of the room where a raised platform held what was clearly the main control station. As he approached, more screens came to life around the room. "Captain," Matt Rodriguez called out. His communication equipment was picking up stronger signals now. "The whispers are getting louder, and I think they're trying to communicate with us. Can you understand anything?" "Not words, but the patterns are becoming more complex. It's like the ship is learning how to talk to us." Lisa was examining one of the smaller control stations. "This is incredible technology. These controls aren't buttons or switches. They respond to touch, but also to thought somehow." "Don't touch anything yet," Jake warned. "We don't know what these systems control." But as he spoke, the main screen in front of him flickered to life. Images began to appear. Scenes of space, of planets, of creatures they had never seen before. The images moved fast, like someone was showing them a history of the galaxy. "It's trying to tell us something," Kate said, watching the display. The images slowed and focused on one scene. It showed a planet covered in cities, with ships flying between massive towers. The beings living there looked like tall, thin humanoids with 4 arms and large eyes. "First contact," Ryan breathed. "It's showing us first contact with different species." The scene changed to show the same planet. But now the cities were burning. The tall beings were fleeing in ships as their world died behind them. Some of the ships were heading toward something in space. Toward the massive ship they were now standing inside. "It's a refugee ship," Jake realized. "This ship rescued survivors from dying worlds." The display continued showing more scenes. Different planets, different species, all meeting the same fate. War, natural disasters, plagues, each civilization reaching the end and sending their last survivors to the great ship. "How many?" Kate asked quietly. Ryan checked his scanner against the ship's layout. "Based on the size and the different sections we've detected, maybe dozens of different species. All extinct now, except for what's preserved here." Alex frowned. "But where are they? We haven't seen any aliens, living or dead." The question was answered by the next image on the screen. It showed the interior of the ship, but filled with different kinds of beings working together. Then the scene shifted to show the same areas, but empty. The beings weren't gone. They had become part of the ship itself. "The ship absorbed them," Lisa said, understanding. "Their consciousness, their knowledge, everything that made them who they were, it preserved them by making them part of itself." Jake felt a chill. "And now it's found us." The whispers Matt had been hearing suddenly became clearer. They weren't in any human language, but somehow the meaning came through clearly. "Welcome, young travelers. We have been waiting so long for new voices to join our song." The team looked around in amazement. The ship was talking to them directly, speaking into their minds. "We are the last remnants of 97 civilizations that once filled this galaxy with life and wonder. When our bodies failed, we chose to preserve our essence within this vessel. We have wandered the stars for millions of years, hoping to find others like ourselves." Jake found his voice. "Others like yourselves?" "Beings of curiosity and compassion. Explorers who venture into the unknown not to conquer, but to understand. We have watched your species from afar, young humans. You show promise." Kate stepped forward. "What happened to all the other civilizations? Why did they die out?" The ship's voice carried sadness across the millennia. "Some destroyed themselves through war. Others grew too comfortable and stopped growing, eventually fading away. A few were destroyed by natural disasters they could not escape. Each thought they would endure forever. None expected to need preservation." "But you saved them," Ryan said. "We saved what we could. Their knowledge, their art, their dreams, their warnings, all of it lives on within our neural networks. We are a library of the galaxy's lost children." Alex looked uncomfortable. "And what do you want with us?" "To learn. To understand what makes you different. Your species shows a rare balance, strong enough to survive, but not so aggressive that you destroy yourselves. Curious enough to explore, but cautious enough to proceed carefully. You may be the first species we have encountered that could avoid the fate of all the others." Jake felt the weight of the ship's attention on him. Millions of years of accumulated wisdom and loss were studying humanity through his actions. "We're honored by your interest," Jake said carefully. But we're just explorers. We're not representatives of all humanity. You are exactly what we hoped to find, the ship replied, humble enough to recognize your limitations, but brave enough to face the unknown. We would like to learn more about your species, Captain Jake Morrison. Will you allow us to study you? Jake looked at his team. They were the first humans to make contact with alien intelligence, and that intelligence was asking permission to learn about humanity. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. What kind of study? He asked. The ship's presence felt heavier now that it was actively communicating with them. Jake could sense something vast and ancient focusing its attention on their small group. The screens around the control room continued to flicker with images of lost civilizations. The study we propose is simple, the ship's voice echoed in their minds. We would like to observe how you solve problems, how you treat each other, how you react to challenges. Nothing harmful. We have learned that actions reveal truth better than words. Kate stepped closer to one of the displays. You said you absorbed the consciousness of other species. Are they still aware? Can we talk to them? They exist within our neural networks, yes. Their knowledge and personalities remain intact. Some choose to interact with visitors, others prefer to rest. We do not force participation. Lisa was examining the walls more closely. She had noticed that the crystal-like material seemed to pulse with a faint rhythm. The walls themselves are alive, aren't they? Partially. We are a fusion of biological and mechanical systems. Our neural networks grow through the ship's structure like veins through a body. What you call walls are part of our thinking system. Ryan looked amazed. You're not just a ship with an AI. You are the ship. We are many minds sharing one body. Yes. Each absorbed civilization added their knowledge and perspective to our collective consciousness. We see through millions of eyes, remember through countless memories. Pete Adams had been quiet, but now he spoke up. All those species you absorbed, did they have a choice? The ship paused before answering. Yes. We only accept those who choose to join us. Many preferred to face extinction rather than lose their way. Individual bodies. We respected their choice. Alex Turner was studying the tactical implications. How many ships like this are there? We are unique. The civilizations that built our original form are long extinct. They created us as their final act, hoping we would preserve something of what they had been. Jake was beginning to understand the enormous responsibility they faced. This ship represented millions of years of galactic history. Every extinct civilization that had ever existed might have left some trace within its vast memory banks. You want to test us, Jake said. To see if humanity is different from all the others. Not test. Understand. Every species believes they are special, that they will survive where others failed. We have learned to look for specific qualities that might allow a species to avoid extinction. What qualities? Kate asked. The ship showed them new images, scenes of the various extinct civilizations in their final days. Some were destroying themselves with weapons that turned their planets into molten glass. Others showed cities falling into ruin as their inhabitants grew lazy and stopped maintaining their civilization. Adaptability without aggression. Curiosity without recklessness. Strength without cruelty. Unity without conformity. Very few species achieve this balance. Lisa touched the wall gently. The crystal material warmed under her hand and pulsed brighter. It's responding to me. Our neural networks react to emotional states. We sense that you approach us with wonder, rather than fear. This is promising. Matt Rodriguez was monitoring his communication equipment. Captain, I'm picking up other signals now. Different voices, different languages. I think other absorbed civilizations are trying to communicate with us. The main screen changed to show symbols from dozens of different writing systems. Slowly, words began to appear in English. Greetings, young humans. We welcome you to our sanctuary. Your species shows much promise. Be careful. The tests are more important than they appear. Jake read the last message with concern. Tests? You said this would just be observation, the ship's main voice returned. Observation through interaction. We will present you with situations that reveal character. How you respond will tell us what we need to know about humanity. And if we fail these tests? Alex asked. You will be free to leave. We do not hold anyone against their will. But if you prove suitable, we will offer your species something no other has been offered, which is partnership. Not absorption into our collective, but true cooperation. Your species could help us contact other young civilizations before they reach extinction. Together, we could prevent the galaxy from becoming a graveyard of failed potential. The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. They weren't just making first contact. They were being evaluated as potential guardians of galactic civilization. Dr. Amy Chen, who had been quiet since entering the ship, finally spoke up. The bio readings I'm getting from these walls are incredible. This isn't just technology. It's a new form of life entirely. You are a botanist, the ship said, somehow knowing her specialty. You would appreciate our gardens. We have preserved samples of plant life from every world we have visited. Gardens? Inside the ship? Vast ones? Each species' surviving members were comforted by familiar growing things. We maintain ecosystems from 97 different worlds. Ryan checked his scanner readings. That would explain some of the energy patterns we detected. You're not just running ship systems. You're maintaining entire biospheres. Correct. We are Ark, Library, and Mausoleum. We preserve not just knowledge, but the living essence of what each civilization held dear. Jake made a decision. Show us. We want to understand what you've preserved. The floor beneath them began to move, forming a platform that carried them toward another passage. The corridor they entered was different from the others, warmer, with a humid quality to the air. This is the garden section, the ship explained. Here you will see what we have kept alive from 97 extinct worlds. They emerged into a space so vast it took their breath away. The ceiling stretched up beyond sight, and the landscape before them was divided into distinct zones. Each area contained plants and trees unlike anything on Earth, in colors and shapes that defied imagination. Each section represents a different world, Amy said in wonder. Look at the diversity. Some areas had trees with silver leaves that rang like bells in the artificial wind. Others contained flowing liquid-like plants that moved in patterns too complex to follow. There were crystalline formations that grew like flowers, and spaces filled with floating spores that glowed like tiny stars. We maintain the optimal conditions for each ecosystem, the ship said. Some require different atmospheric compositions. Others need specific types of radiation. We provide it all. Kate was examining a section that seemed to contain moving animal-like plants. These are incredible. How many different forms of life exist in the galaxy? More than you can imagine, and most are now extinct. These gardens are tombs as much as they are preserves. The weight of loss in the ship's voice was overwhelming. Jake looked around at the beautiful alien gardens and felt the tragedy of it all. Each section represented an entire world that no longer existed. "This is why the tests are important," the ship continued. "We cannot bear to add humanity to our collection of extinct curiosities. We hope your species might be different." Alex was studying the layout of the gardens. "You could house millions of people in a space this size." "We have. During the height of our collecting period, we sheltered over 10 million beings from various worlds. They lived here while their home planets died, hoping their children might one day return to rebuild. But they never did? No. Eventually, all chose to join our collective rather than maintain the pain of loss. It was easier to become part of something eternal than to remain individuals facing an empty universe. Jake understood now why this first contact was so important. Humanity wasn't just meeting aliens. They were meeting the last repository of galactic civilization. And somehow, they had to prove they were worthy of the trust placed in them. "When do the tests begin?" he asked. "They already have," the ship replied. "Your reaction to our gardens, your questions about choice and freedom, your concern for the extinct species, all of this tells us about human nature. And what have you learned so far? That you may be the first species we have encountered that mourns for strangers." The ship guided them deeper into its vast interior, through corridors lined with what looked like memory crystals. Each crystal glowed softly, containing the preserved thoughts and experiences of long-dead civilizations. Jake felt like he was walking through the galaxy's largest graveyard and library combined. "We would like to establish a deeper connection," the ship announced as they entered a circular chamber. "One of your team must volunteer to link directly with our neural network. This will allow us to understand your species more completely." The Yastid team stopped walking. The chamber they had entered was different from the others. The walls curved around them in a perfect sphere, and in the center stood what looked like a chair made of the same crystal material as the ship's structure. "Link? How?" Kate asked, her medical instincts making her cautious. "Through temporary neural interface. The volunteer's consciousness would remain intact and separate, but we would be able to observe their thought patterns directly. The process is completely safe." Alex stepped forward. "And what exactly would you learn from this? How humans process emotions, solve problems, and make moral decisions. These are the qualities that determine whether a species survives or destroys itself." Dr. Sam Foster, the ship's psychologist, had been quiet through most of their exploration. Now he spoke up. "I'll do it." "Sam, no," Jake said immediately. "We don't know what that thing might do to your mind." "Captain, this is what I'm trained for. First contact psychological protocols. If anyone's going to interface with an alien intelligence, it should be someone who understands the risks." The ship's voice carried what sounded like approval. "Dr. Foster shows the courage and logic we hope to find, but the choice must be his alone." Sam looked at his teammates. "We came here to explore and learn. This is the biggest opportunity in human history. I can't pass it up." Kate checked her medical scanner. "The neural interface appears to be designed for organic minds, but I can't guarantee there won't be side effects." "There will be none," the ship assured them. "We have linked with thousands of different mind types. Human neural patterns are well within our compatibility range." Jake studied the crystal chair. "If we agree to this, what happens next?" "Doctor." Foster sits in the interface chair. "We establish a light connection first, then gradually deepen it as his mind adapts. He will experience our memories and knowledge, and we will observe his reactions. Will he still be himself? Completely. We are not interested in absorption. At this time, only observation. The link can be broken at any moment if he becomes uncomfortable. Sam was already walking toward the chair. "I've made my decision, Captain." Jake wanted to stop him, but he recognized the look on Sam's face. It was the same expression he had worn when he volunteered for the first deep space psychology missions. Sam lived for breakthrough moments like this. "Fine," Jake said. "But we monitor everything. At the first sign of trouble, we pull you out." Sam sat in the crystal chair. Immediately, thin tendrils of light began to extend from the chair's surface, connecting to his temples and the back of his neck. He closed his eyes as the interface activated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Sam's expression changed. His eyes opened, but they were now glowing with the same blue light that filled the ship's corridors. "Incredible," Sam said, but his voice carried strange harmonics. "I can see everything. The memories of entire civilizations flowing through. The ship's neural networks." "Sam, how do you feel?" Kate asked, her scanner focused on him. "Like I'm swimming in an ocean of knowledge. I can see the first civilization that built this ship. They were called the Architects. They knew their star was dying and built this vessel as their final gift to the galaxy." The ship's voice joined the conversation. "Dr. Foster is experiencing our historical memories. This helps us understand how human minds process vast amounts of information." Sam continued speaking, his voice mixing his own words with knowledge from the ship. "After the Architects came the Wanderers. They were explorers like us, but they grew too bold. They found something in the galactic core that changed them, turned them into something else." "What did they find?" Ryan asked. "I don't know. The memory is sealed, too dangerous for new minds to experience." Sam's expression shifted to concern. "The ship is protecting me from certain knowledge." "This shows wisdom," the ship said. "Dr. Foster recognizes that some information must be approached carefully. Many species demand immediate access to all knowledge, which leads to their destruction." Jake watched as Sam's face cycled through different emotions. Sometimes he looked amazed, other times sad, and occasionally frightened. "I'm seeing the end of the Harmony Builders," Sam said softly. "They achieved perfect peace on their world. No war, no conflict, no disagreement about anything. They were so unified that they stopped growing, stopped learning, stopped adapting. When a plague came, they couldn't think of new solutions because they had forgotten how to think differently. The trap of perfection," the ship noted. "Many species fall into this pattern. They solve their immediate problems so well that they lose the ability to face new challenges." Kate was monitoring Sam's vital signs. "His brain activity is off the charts, but he seems stable." Sam laughed suddenly. "I'm seeing the memory dancers. They found a way to transfer consciousness between bodies, thinking they had achieved immortality. But they spent so much time changing bodies that they forgot who they originally were. They became lost in their own identity games. Each civilization taught us something about the ways species can fail," the ship explained. "We study these patterns to recognize them in new species we encounter." "And what patterns do you see in humanity?" Jake asked. The ship paused, clearly analyzing what it was learning from Sam's mind. "Fascinating contradictions. Dr. Foster values individual freedom but also team loyalty. He seeks knowledge but respects the danger of knowing too much. He feels compassion for extinct species he has never met." Sam's expression became more focused. The ship is showing me something specific now, a test scenario. What kind of test? I'm seeing a planet with two species in conflict. One is technologically advanced but dying from a genetic disease. The other is primitive but healthy. The advanced species could save themselves by taking over the primitive species' bodies, but it would mean genocide. Jake frowned. What's the right answer? That's what the ship wants to know. How would humans solve this problem? Sam closed his eyes, thinking deeply. The ship has seen this exact scenario play out with 7 different civilizations. 5 chose genocide and saved themselves short-term, but later destroyed themselves through guilt and internal conflict. 2 chose extinction rather than commit genocide. What would you choose? The ship asked Sam directly. Sam was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was purely his own again. I would look for a third option. Maybe the advanced species could share their technology to help the primitive species develop faster. Maybe together they could find a cure for the genetic disease. Maybe they could find unpopulated worlds where both could survive separately. And if no third option existed, then I would choose extinction over genocide. Some prices are too high to pay, even for survival. The ship's voice carried something like surprise. This is not an answer we have encountered before. Most species immediately choose one of the 2 obvious options. Humans are good at finding third options, Jake said. We don't like being forced into impossible choices. The interface chair began to dim, and the light tendrils disconnected from Sam. He blinked several times, then looked around at his teammates with normal eyes. That was incredible, Sam said. And terrifying. The ship has seen so many civilizations make the same mistakes over and over. How do you feel? Kate asked, scanning him again. Like I've lived through 1,000 lifetimes in a few minutes. But I'm still me. The ship kept its promise about that. The ship's voice filled the chamber. Dr. Foster has shown us something remarkable. When faced with an impossible moral choice, he sought to change the parameters of the problem rather than accept the limitations. This is a rare quality. Is that good or bad? Alex asked. It is hopeful. Most species that develop advanced technology eventually face choices that seem to have only bad options. Those that survive are those that refuse to accept the limitations of the problem. Jake looked around at his team. They had successfully completed the first real test, but he sensed this was only the beginning. What happens next? Jake asked. Now we test the rest of your team, each in ways suited to their skills and responsibilities. Only then will we know if humanity as a whole shares Dr. Foster's promising qualities. The ship led them to a new section that resembled a vast testing facility. Multiple chambers branched off from a central hub, each one designed for different kinds of challenges. Jake could see through transparent walls into some of the rooms. One contained complex machinery, another looked like a medical facility, and a third appeared to be some kind of combat simulation. Each member of your team will face a scenario designed to reveal their character, the ship explained. These are not pass or fail tests, but opportunities for us to understand how humans think and act under pressure. Lisa Parker was studying the mechanical chamber with obvious interest. That looks like an engineering problem. Indeed. Would you like to begin, Chief Engineer Parker? Lisa looked at Jake, who nodded. Go ahead. We'll monitor from here. Lisa entered the chamber, and the transparent walls allowed the team to watch as complex machinery materialized around her. The ship's voice followed her into the room. You are the chief engineer of a colony ship carrying 10,000 settlers. Your ship's life support system is failing, and you have materials to save either the adults or the children, but not both. What do you do? Lisa examined the machinery carefully. Jake could see her mind working as she traced power conduits and analyzed system configurations. Instead of immediately choosing between the two options, she began rewiring components. What is she doing? Kate asked. Looking for option 3, Sam replied, still recovering from his neural interface experience. Lisa worked for 20 minutes, her hands moving confidently through the complex systems. Finally, she stepped back and activated something. The machinery hummed to life with a new configuration. I've reconfigured the life support to run at 60% efficiency, Lisa announced. It won't be comfortable, but it will keep everyone alive until we reach the colony world. The ship's voice carried approval. You chose to save everyone by accepting reduced living conditions for all. Comfort is temporary. Death is permanent, Lisa replied as she exited the chamber. Next, Marine Sergeant Pete Adams volunteered for the combat simulation. The chamber around him transformed into what looked like a war zone. Enemy combatants appeared, but as Pete prepared to engage them, he noticed something. These aren't soldiers, Pete said, lowering his weapon. They're civilians with weapons, probably protecting their families. The ship created a more complex scenario. Pete found himself in command of a unit facing an enemy that was using human shields. The tactical situation seemed to require either accepting civilian casualties or allowing his own men to be killed. Pete studied the situation, then made an unexpected choice. He ordered his simulated troops to withdraw and find another approach, even though it meant losing tactical advantage. Why did you retreat? The ship asked. Because winning isn't worth becoming the kind of person who kills innocents, Pete replied. We'll find another way, or we'll find a different battle. The ship seemed to consider this. Your military doctrine allows for such choices? The best military doctrine always does. Anyone can win by throwing away their principles. It takes skill to win while keeping them. Kate Williams entered the medical chamber next. She was presented with patients from several different alien species, all suffering from diseases she had never seen before. The ship provided basic information about each species' biology, but left her to figure out treatments. Kate worked methodically, applying human medical principles to alien physiology. When she encountered a situation where treating one patient might harm another, she found ways to isolate and treat them separately. Dr. Williams, the ship said, you could save more lives by experimenting on the sickest patients to find treatments for the others. Kate never hesitated. Medical ethics don't change based on species or circumstances. First, do no harm. I'll find treatments that help everyone, or I'll help them as much as I can without harming anyone. The ship watched as Kate spent hours carefully treating each patient according to their individual needs. She saved fewer lives than she might have with experimental methods, but she saved them ethically. Tony Blake, one of the engineers, faced a puzzle that required him to understand alien mathematics. The problem seemed impossible until he realized that the aliens who created it thought in different dimensional terms than humans. Instead of forcing human logic onto the alien system, Tony learned to think like the original creators. His solution was elegant and showed respect for the alien way of thinking. You adapted your thinking to match ours rather than imposing your methods, the ship observed. Good engineering means understanding the system you're working with, not forcing it to work like systems you already know, Tony replied. Marine Lucy Carter faced a combat scenario where she had to choose between completing her mission and saving enemy wounded. She chose to treat the wounded first, then found a way to complete her mission without compromising her principles. When asked why she helped enemies, Lucy said, "Once they're wounded and defenseless, they're not enemies anymore. They're just people who need help." Ryan Brooks was given a scientific mystery involving the death of an entire star system. He could have solved it quickly by making assumptions based on human science, but instead he took time to gather evidence and understand the alien factors involved. His careful approach took longer, but revealed that the disaster was preventable if the warning signs were properly understood. This knowledge could save other star systems in the future. Alex Turner faced a security scenario where he had to balance safety with freedom. He was shown a society that had eliminated all crime by eliminating all privacy and personal choice. "This society is completely safe," the ship pointed out. "No violence, no theft, no harm of any kind." Alex studied the simulation. "It's also not worth living in. Security without freedom isn't security. It's imprisonment. A safe society is one where people choose to be good, not one where they're forced to be." Finally, Amy Chen was taken to a section of the ship's gardens that was dying. She was told she could save it by sacrificing another section that contained the last remnants of a different extinct civilization. Amy spent hours studying both sections, understanding their needs and interactions. Finally, she found a way to modify the ship's environmental systems to create conditions that would support both garden sections. "You found a way to preserve both ecosystems?" the ship said with something like wonder in its voice. "Every species deserves to be remembered," Amy replied. "If we start choosing which extinctions matter more, we become part of the problem." When all the tests were complete, the team gathered back in the central chamber. Jake had watched each of his people face impossible choices and find ways to maintain their principles while still solving problems. "What have you learned about us?" Jake asked the ship. "Something unprecedented," the ship replied. "Every other species we have tested eventually compromise their core values when faced with survival situations. Humans seem to find ways to survive while keeping their principles intact. Is that unusual?" "Extremely. Most species believe that survival requires abandoning morality. When they do this, they may survive the immediate crisis, but they lose what made them worth saving in the first place." Sam leaned forward. "What does this mean for humanity?" "It means you may be the first species we have encountered that could actually fulfill the role we hoped to find. A species capable of preserving not just life, but the values that make life meaningful." Jake felt the weight of the ship's attention on them all. "And what role is that?" "Guardians of the galaxy. Protectors not just of planets and people, but of the principles that allow civilizations to thrive. We have been searching for millions of years for a species with the wisdom to help others without destroying them in the process." The implications hit Jake like a wave. The ship wasn't just offering them knowledge or technology, it was offering them responsibility for the future of all life in the galaxy. "That's a huge responsibility," Jake said. "Yes, too huge for any species that seeks only power or survival, but perhaps not too huge for a species that seeks to do what is right." Jake looked at his team. Each of them had faced their test and proven that humans could find moral solutions to impossible problems. But was that enough to take on the responsibility of galactic guardianship? "We need to think about this," Jake said finally. "Of course, such a decision cannot be made quickly. But while you consider, there is something else you must see." The ship guided them to what it called the Hall of Mirrors, a vast chamber where the walls showed reflections not of their physical forms, but of their actions during the tests. Jake watched as scenes played out showing each team member's choices, but from the perspective of those affected by their decisions. "This is how we truly evaluate species," the ship explained. "Not by what they say or intend, but by the consequences of their choices on others." In Lisa's reflection, Jake could see the faces of the 10,000 colonists she had saved. They were cramped and uncomfortable in the reduced life support conditions, but they were alive. Children played in corridors while adults worked together to make the best of their situation. Engineer Parker chose temporary discomfort over permanent loss, the ship observed. The colonists' gratitude lasted much longer than their inconvenience. Pete's reflection showed the families of the civilians he had refused to harm. They were rebuilding their homes, their children growing up in safety because one soldier had chosen the harder path. Sergeant Adams understood that victory without honor is defeat by another name, the ship said. His restraint saved more lives than his weapons ever could have. Kate's reflection revealed something unexpected. The alien patients she had treated ethically had recovered not just physically, but had gained trust in humans. This trust had led to peaceful contact between their species and humanity. Dr. Williams proved that healing creates more than health. It creates relationships, the ship noted. Her ethical treatment opened doors that force never could. Each reflection showed ripple effects that extended far beyond the immediate test. Tony's respectful approach to alien mathematics had preserved important cultural knowledge. Lucy's compassion for enemy wounded had turned those enemies into allies. Ryan's careful scientific method had prevented future disasters. Alex's defense of freedom had inspired oppressed peoples across the galaxy. Amy's preservation of extinct ecosystems had maintained irreplaceable genetic diversity. "This is what makes humanity unique," the ship said as the reflections faded. "Other species make decisions based on immediate consequences. Humans seem to instinctively consider long-term effects on others." Jake studied the empty walls where the reflections had been. "You mean other species don't think about how their actions affect future generations?" "Some do, but only after achieving advanced philosophical development. Humans appear to have this consideration built into their basic thinking patterns. Even your newest crew members made choices based on consequences they would never personally see." Sam was taking notes on his tablet. "From a psychological perspective, that suggests humans have unusually strong empathy development. We don't just understand how others feel. We care about how they'll feel in the future." The ship's voice carried what sounded like amazement. "Precisely. In our observations of 97 extinct civilizations, empathy was typically limited to immediate family groups with some extension to tribal or national groups. Human empathy appears to extend to strangers, future generations, and even abstract principles." Kate looked thoughtful. "Maybe that's because Earth was such a dangerous place. Humans who couldn't cooperate with strangers died out. We evolved to be social across tribal boundaries." "An interesting theory," the ship replied. "But we have observed many species from dangerous worlds. Most become more aggressive, not more cooperative." Ryan was consulting his scientific scanner. "What about human conflict patterns? We've had plenty of wars and violence." "True, but your conflicts follow unusual patterns. Human wars typically end with attempts to rebuild the defeated enemy rather than simply destroying them. This is almost unknown among other species." Alex frowned. "That's not always true. Humans can be incredibly cruel." "Yes, but even your cruelest Members usually require justification for their actions. They must convince themselves that their targets deserve punishment. Other species often require no justification beyond personal benefit. Jake was beginning to understand the ship's analysis. You're saying humans need moral reasons for immoral actions. Exactly. This suggests that morality is deeply embedded in human psychology. Even when humans act badly, they demonstrate that they know what good behavior looks like. The ship showed them new images, scenes from human history that Jake recognized. Wars, disasters, moments of crisis where humanity had faced the same kinds of choices the ship had tested them with. The Marshall Plan after World War II, Jake said, recognizing one scene. America rebuilt the countries it had defeated. The international response to the Indian Ocean tsunami, Kate added, seeing another image. Countries that were enemies sent aid to help strangers. The Montreal Protocol, Ryan noted, pointing to another scene. Nations worked together to fix the ozone layer even though the solutions cost them economically. The ship highlighted each example. These patterns repeat throughout human history. When faced with the choice between short-term gain and long-term benefit to others, humans often choose the harder path that helps more people. Amy was studying images of human environmental protection efforts. We don't always make the right choice, though. We've caused plenty of extinctions on our own planet. True, but you are also the only species we have observed that actively tries to prevent extinctions once you understand the consequences. Most species exploit their environments until collapse. Humans sometimes choose to limit themselves to preserve other species. The ship showed them the final image, the moment when Jake's team had first entered the alien vessel. They were armed and cautious. But their first questions had been about finding survivors, not about claiming the ship's technology. When your team discovered our ship, your immediate concern was for possible injured aliens. You risked your own safety to offer help to complete strangers. This level of altruism toward unknown species is unprecedented in our experience. Jake felt a weight settling on his shoulders. You're saying humanity is special. We are saying humanity is different. Whether that difference is special depends on what you do with it. Sam looked up from his notes. What happened to the other species that seemed promising? Surely some of them had good qualities, too. The ship's voice grew sad. Many did. The builders were incredibly generous with their technology. The peacekeepers eliminated violence from their society. The scholars accumulated vast knowledge. The explorers mapped half the galaxy. But, Kate prompted, but the builders' generosity made other species dependent, rather than self-sufficient. The peacekeepers' elimination of violence also eliminated the strength needed to face real threats. The scholars became so focused on learning that they forgot to live. The explorers spread so far that they lost connection to their home and each other. The examples were sobering. Each extinct civilization had developed one aspect of what might be considered virtue, but had lost balance in the process. Humans seemed to maintain multiple virtues simultaneously, the ship observed. Your team showed courage and caution, generosity, and self-preservation, individual initiative, and group loyalty, all in appropriate balance. Alex was studying the tactical implications. So we passed your tests. What happens now? Now you must decide whether humanity is ready for what we are, prepared to offer. Jake felt his pulse quicken. Which is? Full partnership in preserving galactic civilization. Access to our accumulated knowledge of 97 extinct cultures, technology that could advance humanity by millions of years, and most importantly, the responsibility to guide younger species toward survival rather than extinction. The offer was staggering. Everything humanity had dreamed of since first looking at the stars, knowledge, technology, contact with other civilizations. What would be expected of us? Jake asked. To do what you have already shown you can do. Make decisions based on long-term consequences rather than short-term benefits. Help other species solve problems without imposing human solutions. Preserve what is valuable from cultures that are dying. Lisa raised an important question. And if we refuse? Then you return to Earth with the knowledge that you have made contact with galactic civilization. We will not interfere with human development, but we will not accelerate it either. Humanity will advance at its own pace and face its own challenges alone. The ship paused, then added something that chilled Jake to the bone. But we must warn you. We have detected at least 17 developing civilizations in this galaxy that will face extinction-level crises within the next 1,000 years. Without guidance, most will likely follow the same paths as our 97 extinct cultures. Jake looked at his team. They had come here as explorers and found themselves being offered the chance to become guardians of galactic civilization. The weight of 17 civilizations' potential futures pressed down on them all. How long do we have to decide? Jake asked. As long as you need. But while you decide, there is one more thing you must see. The choice ahead of you is not as simple as it appears. The quantum communication array that the ship provided was unlike any technology Jake had ever seen. It allowed real-time conversation with Earth across impossible distances, bringing the entire weight of human leadership into their discussion. President Maria Santos appeared on the main screen surrounded by advisors, scientists, and military leaders. The emergency session of the Global Council had been called within hours of receiving Jake's initial report. Captain Morrison, the president said, "We've reviewed your preliminary data. The implications are staggering. You're asking us to commit humanity to become guardians of galactic civilization. Not guardians, Madam President. Partners. The ship has made it clear that the Guardian model failed with previous species. They're offering us a chance to try something different." Secretary of Science, Dr. Helen Chang, leaned forward. "Captain, our xenobiological experts have analyzed the data you sent. The level of technology this ship represents could advance humanity by millions of years. But they're asking us to take responsibility for other species' survival in return." General Robert Hayes, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, looked skeptical. "The military implications are enormous. We'd be committing to potential conflicts across the galaxy. Our forces aren't prepared for that scope of responsibility." Jake could see the debate unfolding on Earth exactly as it was unfolding in his own mind. The offer was simultaneously the greatest opportunity and the greatest risk in human history. "There's something else you need to consider," Jake said. "The ship has shown us 17 civilizations that are currently facing extinction. While we debate, they're dying." The ship's voice joined the conversation, speaking directly to Earth's leaders. "President Santos, I have observed your species' decision-making processes through Captain Morrison's team. Humans excel at finding solutions that balance competing needs. This is precisely what galactic partnership requires." Dr. Chang asked the crucial question. "What guarantees do we have that humanity won't end up like the elevated ones? Extinct from the burden of responsibility?" "None," the ship replied honestly. "But humanity has shown one quality the elevated ones lacked: the ability to share responsibility rather than hoarding it. Your team consistently sought to empower others rather than solve problems for them." President Santos looked thoughtful. You're suggesting we could create a network of responsible civilizations rather than becoming sole guardians. Exactly. The goal would be to help each species develop the wisdom to guide others, creating a self-sustaining network of mutual support. Jake could see the president weighing the implications. In the background, advisors were arguing in heated whispers about the risks and opportunities. "Captain Morrison," the president said finally, "what's your recommendation?" Jake looked at his team. They had been discussing this question for days, and he knew where each of them stood. "Madam President, we came out here to explore and discover. What we've found is bigger than exploration. It's the chance to help shape the future of life in the galaxy. But it's also the chance to fail on a scale that could doom multiple civilizations." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My team and I believe that humanity has always been at its best when we've taken on challenges bigger than ourselves. The risks are enormous, but so is the potential to prevent suffering on an unimaginable scale." Dr. Chang looked at the data on her tablet. "The 17 civilizations currently at risk. Can you give us specifics?" The ship responded by displaying detailed information about each threatened species. Jake watched Earth's leaders study the data. Civilizations facing nuclear war, environmental collapse, alien invasion, cosmic disasters. "How long do they have?" General Hayes asked. "It varies. The coral builders have perhaps 6 months before their ocean chemistry becomes too acidic to support life. The mountain clans have maybe 2 years before their nuclear tensions explode into global war. The star-touched have only weeks before their sun's instability destroys their world." The immediacy of the crises was sobering. While humanity debated, entire species were counting down to extinction. President Santos spoke quietly with her advisors for several minutes, then addressed the communication array. "We need to put this to a global vote. A decision this large cannot be made by any single government." "How long will that take?" Jake asked. 72 hours for emergency voting procedures." The ship's voice carried urgency. "In 72 hours, the star-touched will likely be extinct. Their sun's instability is accelerating." Jake felt the familiar human response to impossible. Deadlines. The drive to find a third option. "What if we start with a limited partnership? Help the most immediately threatened species while Earth decides on the larger commitment." "Explain," the president said. "My team and the ship could begin emergency assistance to the species facing immediate extinction. Earth's decision would determine whether we commit to the full partnership or limit ourselves to crisis response." The ship considered this. "It is possible. We could provide your team with the tools needed for emergency intervention while Earth deliberates on long-term commitment." General Hayes looked concerned. "That puts a lot of responsibility on Captain Morrison's team." "We accept that responsibility," Jake said without hesitation. His team nodded in agreement. Sam spoke up. "Madam President, we've already been tested by the ship's scenarios. We know we can make decisions that balance human values with galactic needs." President Santos made her decision. "Very well. Captain Morrison, you and your team are authorized to begin emergency assistance operations. Earth will vote on full partnership within 72 hours. The connection to Earth closed, leaving Jake's team alone with the ship again. The weight of what they had just committed to settled over them. "Where do we start?" Lisa asked. "With the star-touched," the ship replied. "Their sun's instability can be corrected, but it requires precise intervention within the next 18 hours. Jake looked at his team one more time. They were about to become humanity's first galactic intervention team, whether Earth ultimately supported them or not. All right, everyone. We came here as explorers. Looks like we're leaving as something else entirely. The ship began to move, its massive bulk accelerating toward the star-touched system. As they traveled, the ship shared the knowledge and technology Jake's team would need for their first mission. Hours later, Jake stood on the bridge watching as their intervention prevented a solar disaster that would have killed billions of star-touched beings. The grateful transmissions from the saved civilization filled the communication arrays. "First mission successful," Kate reported. "The star-touched solar engineers are already learning how to monitor their sun's stability themselves." "Excellent," the ship said. "You have given them the tools to prevent future crises rather than making them dependent on rescue." Jake felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. They had actually done it, prevented the extinction of an entire civilization. "Captain," Matt Rodriguez reported from his communication station, "we're receiving a priority message from Earth." "President?" Santos appeared on screen again, but she was smiling this time. "Captain Morrison, I'm pleased to inform you that the global vote is complete. Humanity accepts partnership with the galactic ship." Jake felt relief wash over him. "What was the margin?" 78% in favor. "It seems humanity is ready to take on galactic responsibility." The ship's voice carried something that sounded like joy. "Then let us begin. Captain Morrison, you and your team will serve as the first human members of the Galactic Preservation Network. Your ship will be modified with our technology, and additional human volunteers will be trained for this work." Jake looked out at the stars, knowing that humanity had just taken its first step into a larger universe. They were no longer just explorers or even just a spacefaring species. They had become partners in preserving life throughout the galaxy. "What's our next mission?" Jake asked. "The Coral Builders. Their ocean chemistry crisis requires a different approach than stellar engineering. Are you ready?" Jake looked at his team, engineers, scientists, soldiers, and healers who had proven themselves capable of making decisions that balanced survival with morality. They had come seeking the unknown and found their destiny. "We're ready," Jake said. As the ship turned toward the Coral Builders system, Jake reflected on how much had changed since they first detected the massive alien vessel. They had made first contact, been tested and evaluated, and chosen to accept a responsibility larger than any in human history. Humanity's age of galactic citizenship had begun, not with conquest or even with grand declarations, but with a simple decision to help others survive. It was, Jake thought, a very human way to join the galactic community. Behind them, the star-touched were already implementing the solar monitoring systems they had been taught. Ahead of them, the Coral Builders waited for salvation they didn't know was coming. And throughout the galaxy, 16 more civilizations faced their own critical moments, unaware that help was finally on the way. The ship that had once been a tomb for extinct civilizations had become something new, a vessel of hope carrying humanity toward its greatest challenge and its greatest opportunity. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would humanity.